You're listening to the Color Country Podcast, your passport to the breathtaking public lands and tourism destinations nestled in southern Utah and northern Arizona. Join host Stephanie DeGraw and her guests.
Hi, and welcome to the Color Country Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie DeGraw, and today we're excited to have a very special guest, Dr. James Kirkland, who is our state paleontologist, and he is with the Utah Geological Survey. Welcome.
Hey, glad to be here. It's always great to come to St. George.
Definitely. And you're located up in Salt Lake, I believe.
Yeah, they base us out of Salt Lake, but work all over. You know, get the call. We found something. We put our little Dino Buster alarm on the vehicle and head on out and see what they got.
Well, that's what's exciting is you did get called to Utah right here in our backyard and southern Utah. And you've got some great news to share with us. What was discovered and how was it discovered?
Well, initially, this site was found by Sheldon Johnson back 25 years ago.
Right.
It's one of the very first things I did when I got this job. I've been doing it for almost 27 years now, was to come down here. And of course, the Johnson family were only interested in what this could be, for their community.
Which is very fortunate that they had the foresight back then to realize.
The Johnson family versus someone else. Sheldon had been on the school board for 19 years and very active in the community. And he wanted something that would be a long-term benefit. And they certainly have something that will last, hopefully, into perpetuity.
Right. And I do encourage everyone to go to the Dinosaur Museum, and the area right is where we're going to talk about that all those many years ago, they found the dinosaur bones and then they pulled together the Dinosaur Museum. And it's just amazing to me that here it is now, all these years later, and they're still discovering dinosaur bones right here in St. George.
Well, some of this layer was first found when they were building the school.
And which school is that?
This is Fossil Ridge Intermediate School.
Okay.
And they found it, and they fenced off the dinosaur bed. It's on their property, because it's just the other side pavement. It's just a little strip. But they've set it aside for scientific research. And basically, this site we're trying to salvage extends to the south and then bends around to the east, an area that was designated initially for a park area. And basically, the city and the power, to keep people in charge of power in this area, as they say, the powers that be, needed to put in a power substation. Right. The city tried to find another site, and they shopped around for a long time. And I think they put out, bids on some land.
Right.
But when people found out what they wanted to use it for, they said, well, that'll lower the value of the land that we own adjacent to that piece. So we really don't want to sell it to you. City already owned this. Okay. And, you got to think of your taxpayers, too. They believe in multiple use. We've got to make the most sense of this stuff. And it was going to be park. If it had been under grass, it would be there for 100 years.
Right. Okay. We wouldn't have even known. And let's tell our listeners what happened, why it's so unusual, too, was that the city was going to build a power station there.
Yeah, a substation.
Excuse me.
Yeah, distribute the power out various places. Not my area of expertise either.
Right, mine either. And St. George and Washington County, as we know, it's just crazy how much it's growing and continues to grow. I lived here a long time ago, and I've been back 3 years. And just the short 3 years I've been here, the growth has been exploding. And so then you are going to run across things that were here before we got here, like
certainly.
These dinosaur
when I first drove through here 40 years ago, I said, having worked a lot down on the big res on the Navajo Reservation, that's where I did my master's and PhD research. So I'm very familiar with the Red Rocks and their fossils. I said, this place is going to be a gold mine. And these sites would not have been discovered without development.
There's that,
peeling into the fresh rock. Sheldon was flipping over blocks trying to level off hills to, make the land more sellable to developers. Because at that time, when I first came down, it was a dirt road.
Right.
East Riverside Drive was was just dirt going through there. And, they found those initial sites. And then I was down there working. We had gotten funding from the state senate, some money to start preserving the site. And we were working there preserving it. And all of a sudden, it's all this construction equipment across the road. And went, what's going on over there? And, oh, that's Darcy Stewart, Sun River Development. And they're leveling the land there for future development on the road here. And I said, I got to get his name. So I set it up so Andrew Milner, the site paleontologist, could go over and collect data. And they were flipping up track blocks, and they were shipping them out to Hilldale. And about a month later, I think I wasn't there, but I understand from Andrew, they looked, and across the street, all the workers are out there sweeping off this bench with brooms. And Darcy comes up in his truck, see how the work is going. He's like, what are you guys doing? You're supposed to be leveling this hill. And they're like, look at all these new dinosaur tracks and big
and
fish.
And the workers found
fish
them.
Nests.
Oh, my goodness.
And Darcy starts looking at this and shakes his head and says, we got to preserve this. And they brought all the track blocks, semi-truck loads of blocks back from Hilldale. They're up behind the museum under wooden crates.
Okay.
And donated the land for an extension of the track site on the other side of the road from where the current facility is today. And then they found on the hill just a little south of his property this whole stack of track levels going up this hill just between the school and the main road there. And that was the LDS Church was going to build a steakhouse there. And the church folks came out and started looking at this stuff and said, oh, wow, this should be preserved. And they traded the city for some other property to build the steakhouse.
Okay.
So those two properties were earmarked by the people that gave them to the city of St. George for extensions. And our additional dream for the site long term, and we've had this for over 20 years, is to put a building over the LDS Hill track site and inside expose 3 levels. Also, since it's got the biggest collection of swimming dinosaur traces anywhere in the world, reconstruct that for an exhibit because that's mostly outside weathering. And then a building so that legally fossils from federal and state lands that are found in the area in Washington County can be reposited in association with that facility. So a curation facility building. So we're hoping someday that'll happen. So that's the dream. And we've been working to get the site designated Utah's first paleontological landmark. And that's been on the books for almost 40 years in Utah, that the state paleontologists can declare paleontological landmarks, except it's never been done.
Okay.
But this is the perfect place because it's already interpreted. Right. So, this is an incredible thing. And I understand the Park Service is thinking of rating it as a national natural landmark, and UNESCO is looking to make it a global geosite. So these things are all happening. In fact, it was supposed to be a global geosite last year. Yes. But there was a change in venue to some other Europeans that were running that program. Mm-hmm. And they decided U.S. had enough global geosites for that round. So probably the next round, it'll be designated a UNESCO Global Geosite, which brings in international tourists.
Amazing. Yes.
It's just tourism.
Amazing.
It's just a label. They say they can say nothing about how it's managed.
And that will definitely help with hopefully raising money for this dream of the building and everything, which will help preserve it, plus the tourism boost. I was wondering, let's talk a little bit about, there's kind of a deadline going on too.
The word crisis came out.
Yes, in the media, I saw that.
Basically, it's because when the city finally, we cannot find another site, and we've got to do this. The population is growing here rapidly, and we need to have dependable power everywhere. We can't have, rolling blackouts like they do in California.
Well, and I lived here so long ago, the first time around. This is my third time living here. But first time around, I do remember rolling blackouts. And do you by any chance know why they couldn't find another site?
Well, it sounds, and I'm reading between the lines.
I can ask them, but
in
general,
the the word I've got was basically they were trying to buy a place, but then they wouldn't sell it to them because they basically said, well, we don't want you to build a substation here because that'll lower the value of the land adjacent.
Okay, that's what you're talking about. The neighbors don't really want that in their neighborhood.
Yeah, as do the neighbors there now aren't real happy. They had no problem with the museum and the park area, but they're not real happy about this. But, these things have to go somewhere.
Right, and it's needed for a growing population.
And as I understand it, they got to put in like 20-foot footers into this thing.
So
they're
deep in the ground,
way down.
Right.
If they're just setting it on the surface, it wouldn't be that big a deal. Because, 100 years, 200 years from now, it would still be there. But they apparently have to just dig down through all this stuff. So we're trying to save the fossils because it's the only dinosaur bed in rocks of this age. It's the very beginning of the Jurassic. This is the oldest large dinosaur bed anywhere in North America. I mean, we've got a couple little scrappy small dinosaurs at around this level on the Navajo reservation. But we're getting teeth. We got a tooth the other day that big.
Wow.
These are big meat-eating dinosaurs that were, and we got good evidence that they were eating a lot of these fish that are being found there.
Right.
So it was they're taking advantage. We got a whole ecosystem, but it follows one of the big 5 extinctions, the Triassic extinction, and that extinction is why dinosaurs took over the world. They survived and radiated out and populated the planet. This is within 500,000 years of that global extinction event, and that was in the oceans and on land, wiped out something like 60-70% of all the animals on Earth. And this is the recovery. And so that's why we have scientists the world over. The track site, in a study by some geologists back in Denver and further east, decided this was the second most significant dinosaur track site in North America. Number 2 on the continent. And then a European group trying to do, statistically what makes a scientifically important site. This came out number 18 in the world as a significant site. So people just never think about that.
Right in our backyard.
It's another track site, because there are track sites. But this is a really important because it's the whole story. Because there's plant fossils, there's dinosaur bone and teeth, fossil fishes, sedimentary features. You've gone through the exhibit, I would assume, at some point. It's it's extraordinary. It's the whole story of the environment 200 million years ago, following one of the big 5 mass extinctions in Earth history. So it's one of the only places you could ever go to get this data, which is exciting.
And I'm sorry, I keep coming back to why does the city need to have you guys move on it so quickly?
Well, they need to build this facility because
of our growth.
Yeah, and they
so
it
the
was
demand
January,
is there. Yeah.
And January is when they finally said, we don't have any choice.
Okay.
It's got to be here.
And so now
it's crisis,
you've got everyone, at least what's exciting to me is all these people from around the world are rallying.
People flying in from Europe
to come and help Utah preserve our dinosaurs, which is really extraordinary.
I can't believe the turnout. We had to ring the alarm bell. And of course, social media, there were people saying, they're evil down there. They're, destroying this stuff. No, they're not. Folks, settle down. Social media can escalate, opinions really rapidly.
It's good for raising awareness, but it can also go off in different directions.
Pull the brake on some of this stuff. We've put up a few things saying, no, this is not what's happening.
And so
but we need people. It is a crisis. We need money.
Right.
And we need warm bodies.
And more people, like you say, to come volunteer and help you so that you guys can pull out and extract and preserve as much as you can before
salvage the site.
You're trying to salvage the site, and all the volunteers can come in and help you guys with that before the building gets built.
Yeah, before they put in. And they were wanting to break ground in April. They've pushed it back into May. I've got to be gone for part of April because I'm doing Green River Rocks next weekend, leading some field trip. And then soon after, we open Utah Raptor State Park.
Right, down by Moab.
I named Utah Raptor, so I've got to be there for that. So there's a lot coming up, And then we're doing all the publicity for Walking with Dinosaurs, both in London and in Utah.
Tell our listeners a little bit about that project.
Yes, the BBC gave me a call a couple of years ago and asked me, do you guys have any places? We know you're pretty famous for your ankylosaurs. Those armored, spiny, an armadillo tank-like dinosaurs. And we've got a lot of them in Utah. And I said, oh, I know, there's not many sites where you can say, we'll go out there because they want to see it being excavated on camera.
Okay, yes.
Not many places in the world.
You could even show that,
where you
right.
can say, come out here next summer and we will dig some of these on camera for you. And there's a site I knew of that had been dug by the Denver Museum for some years, but they hadn't worked on it for 7 years. Talked to them. I talked to the Bureau of Land Management. Are you folks willing to turn it over to a Utah institution? So we got the Prehistoric Museum in Price, Utah, to take over the site. So all the new fossils are going to Price, Utah for their collections. And it's the biggest accumulation of armored dinosaurs in the world. So the BBC, one of their episodes, this is a 6-part series, Walking with Dinosaurs originally was the biggest natural history show in the history of television. Discovery Channel built a studio in Montreal that I worked at with them because I was their advisor for a lot of years. It set up the studio, Meteor Studios in Montreal to do animations for various shows. It was such a huge money maker. But sadly, they discovered that dysfunctional family building motorcycles makes just as much money because it is a for-profit
organization.
that a $5 million show does for $50,000 an episode. So tick, 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 tick. Okay, we're moving into reality TV. And that's what happened to Discovery Channel, the transition. And,
that's
the dollars talk.
Sure.
So that would move that
now they're coming back to you, right?
The BBC is doing this.
The BBC is coming and saying, okay, we're going to step in and
do another episode, another series.
Shows.
And we're doing 6 episodes, and one is fully in Utah.
Oh, that's exciting.
And it's really good. I've seen without the final narrations, but I've seen the whole thing, and it looks pretty good. I would tweak things, but I'm pretty picky as a scientist.
Sure.
And it's, they only could animate so many because the cost of animation is quite high.
That's true.
So it's like, no, you should have 100 of them. And they're like, 100 of them.
You wanted to show the reality, but at least this will give.
Talk to me about my love of this place and how I see its future. Like, what? Because I tend to think big.
Well, that's what we need. We need visionaries like you so the rest of us can see the potential of sharing this great educational opportunity that we have here.
It is. I mean, look at La Brea in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
It's in downtown Los Angeles, and basically it gets like 3 million visitors a year, and it's an urban paleo site. It's incredible attraction. They just opened, I think last week or something, the Rowan Center in New Jersey, this big fossil site there, and they built a $27 million facility over the top of that site.
Well, then St. George can do it too.
Well, it's if we get 2-3 million, we need the infrastructure. One of the big things that caused it to be a crisis was the signage was taken down to the track site when they were doing road work. It was never put back up. And visitation, because of that, dropped by 50%. Tourists coming down I-15 or up I-15 would see, dinosaur track site. And the kids would go, can we go see the dinosaurs? And they got a lot of visitation from that. When that signage went down, visitation dropped by 50%. They had to lay people off.
Wow.
And the budget for the science and for their lab went to zero. Okay. And basically, so when this happened, there was no money for plaster, anything. So that's why we got the big fundraiser. I mean, we raised over $10,000 in less than 2 months.
And if people want to help, besides coming out and getting dirty in the dust and getting in the nitty-gritty and helping, what else can they do? Talk about how you can...
They can go to the St. George Dinosaur Discovery site.
Online.
Website. And their email is, utahdinosaurs.org. That's their website. So utahdinosaurs.org, I think, will get you there. And basically, they have ways you can go in. They even have a gift list at one of the big hardware distributors. So you can buy hammers.
Oh, that's great.
They're like, we've got enough picks. It's like, we don't need any more picks.
Okay.
A lot of our retired volunteers don't swing picks very long in the hot sun.
That's right. It's just going to get hotter.
Plaster bandages. And the wish list is great. Every day they're getting all these packages just sent to them of equipment and supplies. But in cash, they've had over 10,000. And they've been using that. Some of the construction companies have stepped up with big equipment, which is very much needed. And they're using some of this money to pay for fuel, and some of that. But they're using their people and their equipment to help move. There's these huge mounds of material that were dumped on the site, too.
Oh, right.
And so that doesn't hurt the city because they got to move those anyway.
Right.
We want to look for fossils in there.
Sure.
Because the whole school sits on fossil sites, and that was all bulldozed off the school. And we know it's full of track blocks and things.
Well, it's exciting to hear that so many people are stepping up locally and internationally to help where they can, donate time, resources, employees, and then people helping with the wish list on the website. And I do want to encourage everyone to go to that website and take a look around, see if there's something, any little bit will help.
And come by and visit and, look over and see what's going on.
That's pretty cool too. When can you
George's,
do that?
Window into 200 million year ago prehistory. Lake Whitmore is, that environment was a lake as big as Lake Erie. We're along the northern shoreline and we can trace it past Kanab and up through Cedar Canyon, the shoreline kind of diagonaled up, and Zion, has these lake beds. This is the northern shore. The south shore is probably like the Grand Canyon.
Okay. Yes, when you think about the fact that there was a lake here, and that blows my mind because all I see is red dirt here now.
It's amazing. A huge lake, and it's not the same thing as Lake Bonneville was during the Ice Age up north. This is a early Jurassic lake, and there's a paper coming out soon by Selena Suarez out there right now. In Geology Bulletin, suggesting that the lake is because of the extinction event, which was ticked off by a thing called CAMP, the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, which is when the North Atlantic was opening up or ripping apart from Europe. We have all these gigantic volcanic lava flows that were covering thousands of square miles, and the gases and water vapor that was going up as this seaway was being ripped open caused an intense amount of rain. So before this, we had like the Okabonga Delta in Botswana. We had this huge inland river delta that the river just kind of fizzled out into the desert. But then at this interval, at the very boundary between the Triassic-Jurassic, the event caused a lot more rainfall in this part of the world, and this huge lake system developed over the area. So we think this lake is actually marking this radical climatic shift because of this gigantic, globally important volcanic episode. It's just amazing how this stuff links together. I'm working on a similar thing for what killed off our famous Jurassic Park of Utah, the Morrison Fauna Dinosaur National Monument and Jurassic National Monument. I'm publishing now quite a bit on a mass extinction there that killed off almost all the North American dinosaurs. And we got repopulated largely from Europe, island hopping across that proto-North Atlantic. And that's why Japan's coming over and the Brits are coming back, because this is some big news. And it'll be the next generation of paleontologists that prove if I'm an idiot or if I actually was onto something.
I think you're onto something. And I think it's so exciting this is happening here in southern Utah, and that we can go out there in the next little bit and watch you guys work, go online and volunteer or donate to this. What else do you want to say in closing about the project?
It's an incredible tourist opportunity. People come all over the world. There's been about 40 published scientific papers on that site already. That's like comparable to Dinosaur National Monument in 150 years. Right. This thing's only been known about for 25 years. 40 scientific papers. There's been at least 30 talks at various national meetings and international meetings. There was a book written about the site. There's been 7 conventions that have come to St. George specifically because that place was here. They're talking about drilling a big 6 to 8 inch core through Sand Mountain, probably set it up near the road, diagonal through all those rocks for the Colorado Plateau Continental Drilling Program to get a record of this Triassic-Jurassic animal, and that'd be a multi-million-dollar project, and certainly be hiring a number of oil and gas type people to do the work. There's just a lot happening. This is a catalyst. When it was first discovered, there were 180 fossil sites known in Washington County. Now there's over 700, because of all the people going out looking and reporting things. It's like, we knew this stuff had to be here.
And now
this has become the spark that has just lit off an incredible amount of stuff. And, it'll bring in people, and it's like, it's real hot out there. Might be a little tough playing soccer that day. Let's take the kids over there and look at that complex.
Absolutely. That complex is already beautiful with the Dinosaur Museum, and I'm hoping that raising awareness, we can help take it to the next level so that we can continue to protect these dinosaur bones and things that you find.
And use them to interpret. And
right.
I mean, there are busloads of Japanese tourists there a couple days ago. It's a great stopover between Las Vegas and Zion.
Absolutely.
And it has an international reputation now. So we're wanting to polish it, finish off the north side of the road, make it beautiful as well, and make it a destination location as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be linking your information with our show on our website, colorcountrypodcast.com. And as you know, you can listen to us on iTunes and Spotify, all those great places. Thanks so much for being with me today, and have a great day. This has been Stephanie DeGraw for the Color Country Podcast.
You've been listening to the Color Country Podcast. Enjoy your public lands and remember to leave no trace.